Professor, so I did my paper on the DACA Act, Dreamers Act. My thesis was, while the DACA Act supports so many immigrants from deportation and helps them gain a social security card and workers authorization card, why is there such a strong stance against it when all it is doing is helping these younger people with their education and career goals? The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Act is a controversial law that is discussed across the United States of America. Hi, Professor. So I did my paper on the Dreamers Act, DACA Act. My thesis was, while the DACA Act supports so many immigrants from deportation and helps them gain a workers authorization card and a temporary social, why is there such a strong stance against it when all it is doing is helping people fulfill their career and educational goals? The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Act is a controversial law that is discussed across the United States of America. The Homeland Security on June 12, 2012 announced that certain people who came to this country were able, if met guidelines, they can put in a request to be considered for this act, to be a recipient of this act for a period of 2 years. They were allowed to receive a workers authorization, a temporary social, which would allow them to get driver's license, to work, to go to school, to do many things, and as well as they weren't allowed to be immediately removed from this country. So deportation wasn't possible immediately for them because of where they stand with the DACA Act. The controversial law pertains to topics that we have discussed in class. The article by Bornstein that we discussed relates to the thesis because it states that such policies do not necessarily or even usually refer to race, but they can be on the surface of race and colorblind, but they never manage to reproduce and sometimes they nevertheless manage to reproduce and intensify racial hierarchies and disparities. This was a quote in Bornstein on page 2. These DACA recipients feel as though because they are a minority against other minorities as well, the white people get the most advantages being how our society works. Like in the instance when Trump had stated that the reason why he has stated partially that he wanted to get rid of these Mexicans and Native Latin Americans and these DACA recipients, or wanted to put them on hold, and how he wanted to slow down immigration because he had felt that it wasn't benefiting our country and that it was taking away from our country. But a lot of people look at this and see this as partially being racist because Donald Trump has stated before that Mexicans send their murderers and their rapists. So I feel like this quote goes direct with my thesis because it talks about how things can be colorblind and they could seem as though they're about something else when really they're nevertheless about race. Because most DACA recipients are Mexican, and that has been seen and that has been understood, and people in society feel as though Donald Trump could have racial bias when it comes to Mexicans. These articles also relate